Hi, this is Julie Harris Walker of The Other 50%, A Herstory of Hollywood. I'm going to interrupt this podcast feed to introduce you to Catch a Break. This is the insider's guide to breaking into and navigating Hollywood, and we have just launched Season 2. I'm going to offer you Season 2, Episode 1 right here to get you into the podcast, and then go over to Catch a Break podcast and subscribe to that so you can hear the rest of the episodes. The season is amazing. The guests are incredible. I'm so excited and proud to share this. Hello, and welcome to the Catch a Break podcast, the insider's guide to breaking into and navigating the entertainment industry. Season 2 of Catch a Break is brought to you by Cachet, the production credit card. Manage your cards and spend in real time and get cash back on every dollar you spend on your show with Cachet. I'm Julie Harris Walker, and today on the podcast we'll be talking about development with Todd and Richey Jones. Todd and Richey Jones began their writing career on the Emmy-winning sketch comedy series In Living Color. And from there they wrote and produced several sitcoms, including The Hughleys, and were part of the original creative team behind the blockbuster animated hit Rio. Welcome to Catch a Break and the episode where we're talking about development and writing and coming up with ideas and what do you do with them next and all the steps there. So today we have Todd and Richey Jones with us. And they began their career writing on the Emmy Award-winning sketch comedy series In Living Color. Let's just take a moment for that. That is awesome. Welcome, you guys. We are so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask you, what was your very first job and how did you get it? Richey, you first.
Very first job in entertainment, as you just said, was In Living Color. And
that was your first job?
Yes. I was...
How did you get it?
Well, we first started off aspiring to write feature films. So we wanted to write feature films, and we were writing features, and it was difficult to make a connection and get hired or get someone to read. So sort of as a break, we decided we had some funny sketch ideas, and we were like, look, we're going to write it. It was around the time, I think, it was talk of David Duke running for president.
Oh my God.
If you can believe that. And so we just started riffing on different sketches, and we figured, look, why don't we stop just to for change of pace and write out some of these sketches. So we wrote some, and then we ended up submitting those sketches through an agent. And there's a longer conversation about how we ended up connecting with the agents and the agency, and they submitted it to In Living Color, and then we ended up getting interviewed and then hired for In Living Color.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Was that such a thrill?
It was more than a thrill. It was very exciting. Best first job you could ever have. Training ground. Todd and I practically lived up at the studio once we were there. We just never left. And they ended up just creating a space for us because we read every sketch that was ever done there, and we would just sit up all night coming up with ideas, and we just were tireless. It was so much fun, and we just exhilarated from having that first opportunity.
That must have been the funnest thing.
It was a blast to work with all those different comedians, and it was behind the camera and in front of the camera. There were just so many talented people off of that writing staff. Yeah. And
I remember the first sketch we wrote.
That's tough.
That after writing features, we'd written a few features, and then we wrote our first sketch because they would do a huge packet, and you'd submit your sketches, and the executive producers would approve them, and they get in, and you go to the table, and they read your sketches, and some would die, and then more would die, and then ultimately the ones that made it would live. And then the first one that actually lived, we wrote a sketch on it was like Monday, and then the next week they were building the sets. It was our first, it was so strange because it made it through, and we went down, and Jamie Foxx was, starring in the sketch, and it was just weird because
it's surreal. Right?
It was because you're so used to writing and not seeing anything for, years. You would write and you take the script and you put it in the drawer, and then you wrote something, and TV was
it's fast.
It was so fast and so rewarding because not only would you write it, and then they build it, and the costumes, and then the audience would be there laughing at the jokes. And so it was like an immediate rush because, in a couple of weeks you'd see your work. So I think,
Yeah, that's like being on drugs. Like, how do you ever give that up?
Yes.
Yeah,
It was tough.
It was.
But it was fun.
It
A lot
was
of fun.
So basically, thanks, David Duke.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, David Duke.
Thanks, David. Yeah.
Just
Kind of.
And look, there were people behind the scenes that were great at supporting us, and from the executive side, and also on the show.
Sure.
And you don't get your first opportunity without a lot of people believing in you and trusting in you. And there were some really key people that helped. And I think that once we were kind of like in that system, it was weird because you go from coming up with a couple ideas to literally having to turn in 5 a day. Like
that's a whole
it's a
different
machine. So I think that was kind of our first experience with like generating ideas.
Absolutely.
As a job, and kind of building muscles to create, because every day you'd have to have 5, sometimes 10. I mean, if everyone pitched that morning and they weren't good, then you'd have to come back that afternoon and pitch more ideas.
It's just
so you were reading.
ideas.
I mean, you were looking for ideas everywhere.
You read the newspaper, books, watch anything you could do to get something to spark you for an idea. You were doing it.
Okay, let's dig into that. But first, I want to just introduce Jessica Milanofi, who's one of the founders of Cashlight Films, because we're going to get her talking right now, and I didn't want that to be a surprise. So she's here too.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, Jess.
You've told us about your first job. Do you want to tell us about another first job?
Another first job. I think I already told 2 first jobs. So my third...
What was your
third first job? Let me hear about your third first job.
So in between first jobs, I took a temp job and just went through. I had interviewed at all of the temp agencies, so I was just looking for something that would get me on a desk, and got introduced to an executive at BWR Public Relations. And it didn't really have anything to do with what I ultimately wanted to be doing in film and TV, but it was just kind of another way to meet people and another way to learn a different set of skills. And I think that even though it was kind of off topic a little bit, that's where I learned a lot of the assistant rolling calls, taking messages, dealing with clients, all of that kind of stuff in a way that was different from what I was learning in the production office or in another one of my first jobs.
It's all relevant.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's get back to how do you generate ideas? So that was like, I would think, boot camp of how to do a lot really fast.
It was boot camp.
What worked?
Keenan and John Singleton and Spike and those guys opened doors for people like us who, like, when we were, you're in school and you're looking at what they're creating and laughing and people are responding, and it was so breakthrough. And then when you aspire to do those things and you get a chance to get in those systems, you learn really fast. I mean, it's like college,
And it's sink or swim. You're doing it.
Sink or swim.
It is. And so they have a really good system going there. And I think, getting exposed to coming up with those many ideas and the competition and some of the funniest writers and some of the funniest actors, comedians, they all came through there. I mean, there were people auditioning that we would be called in. They see that, would do a sketch here, a sketch, and they were people that ended up having their own shows later. So I think it was a great learning experience.
And you learn really fast because you'll pitch an idea that you think is a home run, and then you'll see them perform it, and you'll realize it wasn't that great of an idea, and then vice versa. Some idea you're like, well, you're on the fence. Should I put this on the list? And then you'll hear them do it and elevate it, and you're like, wow, that was a great idea. But so you start to learn what ideas work and why. And sort of how that worked. Oh, that's.
You got to get thick skin really fast.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can't be afraid to throw out the terrible idea.
Well, I work with my brother, so you get thick skin. I had thick skin prior to that, and then you get thicker skin once you get on a show like that.
Right.
And there's so many talented people who are pitching ideas, and so many talened cast members. So.
Are you looking at the news? Are you reading paper?
Absolutely.
Are you reading books? Are you just
every day?
Each other?
You read newspapers. The internet wasn't really big, it wasn't a big thing then, but, like people were actually reading periodicals. They were actually,
touching paper?
Yeah, it's like actually
reading the
touching
paper.
That's weird.
Yeah, right?
It is weird. It is weird.
In Living Color, because it was sketch comedy, it was topical too. So you wanted to know what was in the headlines, like what was headline news and all that stuff. Remember the riots came out and we were just like, yes. Yes. Riot. It's
of course the characters that come out of those things.
Rodney King, yes.
That's 3 sketches right there.
I mean, literally, you're so desperate to get an idea that anything that hit the headline news and that grabbed the world's attention, you were like, I'm going to piggyback.
Something's happening.
I'm going to piggyback
You
off
just
of that.
know. And nothing was off limits. That
Living
show
Color was great because
that show
nothing
was
was
so-
off limits. I mean,
it's
if it offends you, good, bring it on. We're
Bring
gonna try it. So it was great that way.
Yeah.
Is today's climate helpful for that sort of thing?
Sure. I mean, the way my brain works now after years and years of idea generation is nothing's off limits to me because it's my mind. So I can go down roads that even if I never say it, I can explore it. And I think I got that training from In Living Color. Like the more absurd, I'm like, and I can call Todd and kick something around. And
Like, let's just play this out.
Let's just play it out. And I think that's very helpful.
And I think too, I'll give away a secret in that, I think that show really challenged us because the writers were so good and there were so many of them from season to season that were coming in and it was so competitive that you knew if something like the writers were going to come in, either you had to have a very unique pitch on that, or you knew there were going to be 50 pitches going in on a certain topic.
Yeah.
So so I think that, if you get a newspaper, obviously the front page, the front section A is going to be the major topics. You may find the goal pitches in the obituaries. Or the business section, or the sections that nobody reads. Obviously, the sports sections and the topics on the big stage, the world topics, those are going to be the big pitches, but you're going to get a lot of pitches there. So you may find the nuggets in sections and articles that nobody reads, and I think that even now, sometimes, we find ideas in places where a lot of people aren't looking.
Right.
So sometimes truth is crazier than fiction. Yes. So somebody's obituary, when you read it, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy, no one knew this guy. He was a bus driver, but look at the life he led, and that in itself can yield ideas that people normally don't explore.
I think fact is more interesting than fiction a lot of times. I think coming up with the ideas from places that are true, start with the truth and then build from there. When something's true. Yeah, exactly.
So you start in Florida.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's like,
kidding, no offense, Florida.
This guy died. He dropped his wedding ring in the toilet and reached in and got his hand stuck and couldn't get out for 4 days.
And that's how he died?
Well, but it was actually behind there's a guy who stuck his hand behind the water heater and couldn't get out and literally died and had to decide to cut his arm off because he couldn't get out of the base. You read these stories and you're just like, that's crazy, but it's true. I mean, when you start reading some of those smaller stories, they end up being funnier, and even in tragedy, there's
a lot of crazy stuff in this.
A lot of crazy stuff.
It is.
So
what kind of stuff are you guys writing now?
Oh wow, we're there's family comedy, everything. I mean, there's nothing, especially when it comes to the ideas, because now we're transitioning into producing other things. So we've always had ideas, some of them that we couldn't write. And we were like, look, it'd be a good idea if we can find other writers to write them, even if it's something we wouldn't write, because we think it's a solid idea.
How is it different to develop a bigger story than a sketch?
Well, sketch, you got 3 escalating beats, beginning and 3 escalating beats. And so you can, you really can do sketches that are 1 joke sketches, or, you have
5 jokes.
Yeah. You have to escalate them, but with a bigger idea, there has to be more to it. There has to be more of an underpinning, more that you want to say, more that you want to communicate through the idea, longer form, I would say.
And I think too, so much of it, I mean, there was a quote we read about ideas and what works. I won't quote who said it because he's under Me Too scrutiny, but
that's ruined a lot of things.
I know it has. I mean, he's looking at a quote Woody Allen, but I think at the end of the day, so much of it is about your gut. It is really, instinctive when it comes to what works or what's an idea and what's not. So people will pitch an idea and you get pitched ideas all the time and you're just like, man, there's something about it. It just doesn't feel like a movie. It doesn't feel like a story I want to sit and watch 2 hours. And sometimes, people pitch things and they fool me because it ends up being you'll read an article about a story and then you go see the movie and that's a great execution of an idea that I thought really didn't work or I didn't see the way in on that. But usually maybe 85% of the time. You know, when you like you feel something, you're like, okay, that's it. You know, that's love. Like, you know, it's like, you know, that's something that I want to see where that goes. I want to see what that character does. I want to see that world. There's something about that interests me enough to explore it. And, you know, I think that we have a lot of those. I mean, we have, you know, hundreds of, like we have, you know, I don't know if we're going to ever be able to get to all the ideas that we feel like are movies in our lifetime. But I mean, we're now actively finding people, and it's amazing because they're good writers. There's some writers who are amazing writers. They just don't like generating their own ideas.
You'd be surprised of how many writers tell us, I'm looking for something to write. I can't come up with anything that really resonates with me. Right. So a lot of really talented writers we know just have a harder time figuring out what's their next project, what idea they like and why.
So we pitch them ideas according to their talents, their personalities, what they like. And they're like, yeah. And so it's exciting to see them and then collaborate with them and see them run with those. But then on the business aspect too, you know, we just watched Parenthood again. Its anniversary's coming up. And
they screened it at the Writers Guild.
Yeah, we saw Lowell Gantz and Barbara Mandel. It was interesting. I mean, they've had a charmed career, but it was interesting hearing them say that they really only worked on ideas that somebody was waiting for.
After they left Happy Days, I think every time they wrote something, it was because somebody wanted it. Yes. Somebody who had influence and could actually get it made.
So Ron Howard said, hey, how about just, this is little boy, how about Parenthood? Like, how about like an idea about him? Like, I think that even though someone would pitch them a one line or whatever, but they philosophically weren't running around writing specs, their own ideas necessarily. They were taking one lines, or a star was waiting, or a producer or a studio came to them and said, so they were really, for most of their career, only worked on things that somebody else,
they had a good chance of getting paid.
Exactly. Well, you know, if somebody's waiting for something or somebody is interested, you know, when you write that script, there's someone to hand it to. When you know, we'll have ideas or write specs or outlines for things, and there may be like, there's nowhere to go with that. Like you may have to wait 10 years to find a producer or a studio that connects with that idea. It's like matchmaking. So business wise, you know, you have to be either generating a lot of ideas and working on them, or, you know, there's nothing better, as you know, than having an idea that a star pitches you, or a comedian pitches you, or, you know, you're on the show and the star says, hey, I'd like to, you know, do this, or I'd like to do that. Well, you know, you can walk into a studio and say, I have someone who's going to star in this. Somewhere. I mean, those ideas are easy. They're, I mean, one of the things that we worked on that we sold, that eventually ended up going to Universal, that's how we met you. We knew Ice Cube was attached. That's how we worked with Jess on it. And we knew Ice Cube was attached to the concept. So, you know.
That helps.
It helps. You know?
So now I imagine you guys are at a point in your career now where you know people and you can call people to pitch stuff. What is your advice for people who are just starting out, who are writing a million scripts in their living room and then don't know what to do?
I would say, if we're talking about the same thing, I would say the whole Malcolm Gladwell principle, I think, is helpful. I think while you're trying to connect with someone to give your material to, you've got to be working hard on perfecting your craft so that once you can give it to them, it speaks to them. And, you know, you can tell it's not someone this is their first script. I think it's helpful. So I would just say keep writing.
And then how many do you think you need to have in your pocket before you start pitching that first one?
What you mean in terms of skill level? How many do you need to have written?
Well, I've heard that don't just go out with one, because they're always going to ask, what else do you have?
Yes, yeah.
They do.
That's true. Yeah.
It's you know, look, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's like asking someone how you found a spouse. You know, it's like, you know, do you go on Tinder, you know, or don't you know, do you
there's one formula.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's some people who say, oh, I met my,
grocery store.
Go to the grocery store because that's where and like I think that there are a bunch of different philosophy people have, and I think Richey and I go back and forth depending on what's going on in the culture and the zeitgeist. And there's times where we have to fight it. Sometimes we have ideas based on what's going on in the trades, and we know we could sell those ideas. Like we know, like I could call tomorrow with a knockoff or two of these ideas, and just philosophically we say, you know, that's money we don't want, because like ultimately your name is going to be attached to that, and it's so, you know, it just seems so cheap to sell that idea. And then you'll read a week later or 2 weeks, like somebody sold it, you know, somebody sold that idea, you know, and like, and you say to yourself, I knew that idea was going to sell because it's that topic or that article drop or that story broke, and you know that that's like the next thing. So there's the commercial financial aspect of it of, do you just want to sell ideas just to sell ideas?
Or do you want to say something?
Do you want to say something? Do you want to come up with an idea that's personal? Do you want to tell a story that you don't care? There's some jokes that we put in scripts that one person may laugh at. And we know when you put that joke in, hopefully more than one, maybe
But it makes
two.
you feel good to get that joke in there.
Exactly. It's an inside joke. Yeah. And then there's jokes and there's stories, that, they're going to connect on they're more cookies on a lower shelf. And it's interesting to hear writers, like we saw about, Parenthood, there's stories in there that were their stories that they know those are personal. Sure. And then there's things that are completely universal that come from a personal place, but are more universal. So I think philosophically as a writer, you have to decide, am I going to chase the trends? I would always say you need to be aware of them. But sometimes, depending on how long it takes you to write something, you may write something and start it and it's not trending, but by the time you finish it, it's red hot. Sure. And what's going on in the culture. Mm-hmm. I mean, think of anybody writing something going on in the Me Too movement, for example. Maybe you were passionate about that 4 years ago. I know, Get Out, when he was writing that, it was the Clinton era, right? And he was talking about Hillary, and then all of a sudden, by the time he finished it, it was still so current with what's going on with Barack Obama and then Trump. And I think that sometimes you can't predict that. So sometimes you have to just decide, this idea is something I'm passionate about. I don't care what's going on in the world. I just want to see this. I got to get this out. I want to have this baby, and I don't care what people say about it. And then sometimes you have bills to pay, and you're looking at
That's the thing, because you can do both, right? You can sell the idea that you're not in love with, but that will support you writing the script that you love.
Mm-hmm. You can. And once again, it's a very charmed few have the ability to work on things that you love, not for commercial or financial reasons, and those things end up being commercial or financial. And the vast majority of people have the things they're passionate about, and then they have the things they have to work on, And it's so interesting to me to look at projects that were huge hits, and the people that worked on those projects took them for money reasons. Like, I think it was Adrian Lin or someone I was reading, either it was Flashdance or The Fatal Attraction. Like, I read that, like, the only reason, like, really he took the job was, like, financially he needed the money. Yeah. And I was like, that movie was like, I love that movie. And ended up turning out to be, great. And It worked out. And then sometimes those people take jobs and they take them for the wrong reason and ends up not working out. So I think it's an interesting balance when it comes to ideas. Writers have so much time they invest on those ideas. There are people that write fast, but you have to live with it so much. And then when it gets, I mean, God forbid you write something for commercial reasons and it gets made, and then you get tagged and channeled into that space. Right. Then it's hard to then turn around and say, okay, now I want to write something that has nothing to do with that, that world.
Do you approach things differently when it's your original idea and you're developing it versus if you're, pitching for a studio who is, doing an open writing assignment or something like that? Is it a different approach?
You know what? I think in both, I try to find, or I think I speak for Todd on this. I think we try to find our connection to the piece. Like, where do we identify? Is it a character? Is it something we want to say? We're trying to find our way in. So I think if it's our original idea, then obviously it's something that we're passionate about anyway. But I think if someone pitches us an idea and we're going to work on it, we have to find where our connection is. Like, what is it about that idea that speaks to us to help us to wrap our mind around it? Because like Todd said, you live with it, for an extended period of time. Like, you're living with those characters and in that world. And so you got to
care about it.
You got to care about it.
There's nothing worse than taking a job or getting a job, going in on an idea that you can get, but that you're not passionate about.
That's torture.
And then like 3 weeks into your writing, you're like, why did I take this job? I hate circuses. Why did I write this? Why did I
living in a circus?
Yeah, for the next 2 months, you're like taking, you got to take notes on the circus. And
God forbid they make it.
And then
you got to you got to go see it.
Oh, it's just...
find a character that you love that's in the circus, and something, or backstory, or something that speaks to you and you connect with. And I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
with
And
ideas that you
I think
have
that's
done.
why, I think now that's why we're sharing our ideas so much, is that there are ideas that we know are great ideas that we're like, it's just, I don't know necessarily if I want to live here in this world for however long it's going to take to write this script. But I know writers who they would love to live in this world.
Yeah.
So because I feel like these are ideas that they'll speak to a broader audience, let's give it to somebody who, can raise this kid, because I can't necessarily.
But what a beautiful place to be in, where you can see these ideas come to life, but you don't have to personally do it yourself because you have other
Yes.
things you can work on.
Yes.
How do you guys work together when you're collaborating?
Oh gosh. So in terms of writing, we'll separate, we'll divide up the script and write different scenes. We're on the phone a lot, probably too much.
Sometimes we're in the room together. My wife's tired of me talking to him on the phone.
Right. Sometimes we'll get in the room together and, one of us will sit on the computer. The other one, well, if it's me, I'll pace. I'm a pacer. So I'm walking around thinking about ideas, thinking about stuff, character, dialogue. So we have all kind of different ways we've worked together over the years, but everything from being in the room together to on the phone to dividing up scenes to,
It's tough now. I think idea generation has kind of become our procrastination. So like sometimes the best ideas come when you have a deadline on something else, or you're trying to finish something else. Yeah, me. I'll call. I got three of the best ideas in the world, and he was like, "What's up with scene 4?"
Brainstorm for a while and write tomorrow.
Yeah,
right.
wouldn't it be great if this guy went to the moon?
What if? What if?
Can we talk a little bit about kind of what are your best practices in a writer's room? How do you like that to work?
So that it's what we work efficiently in the writer's room.
Yeah,
Great snacks.
obviously.
You gotta have great snacks.
No,
I think the first thing you need to know in the writer's room is what level are you? I think that I feel like unless you have a personal relationship with the showrunner who hired you, if you're just getting hired on staff somewhere, unless you're best friends with the showrunner, if my brother's a showrunner, then of course I can get away with a lot more in that room than if I don't have a personal relationship. But if I'm just getting hired, then
show deference to those
Know
who
your
are more
place.
senior.
yeah,
Yeah, just show deference. But I think you want to be vocal. You want to be, because they've hired you because they want your voice in the room. So you need to be weighing in. I know a lot of people who get in, they're just not used to the environment, and so they just sit there and say nothing entire time, but then you really haven't made that much of a contribution. And so then when it's time to renew the contract, they're like, well, you haven't said anything. So they may have great ideas, but you have to get comfortable with when to pitch them. And so you
say too much. And
or
it comes time to renew your contract, we got to get rid of this guy.
Yeah, or you can be the person who, overtalks. So I think there's a delicate balance that you have to strike.
So there's a whole read the room skill.
Oh, absolutely.
There is, and you have to know your personality. I mean,
Absolutely.
at 3 a.m. when you're working on something, you need the person who tells the jokes that make everybody laugh at 3 a.m. I mean,
But we'll never make it into the script.
Yeah. Sometimes you're stuck on something and someone's going to say the crazy thing and they're the crazy pitch person.
Yeah.
But you need that pitch
you back
to
into
get you into the pitch that actually works.
Like it moves it forward.
Yes.
But that's not a winning idea.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes the crazy idea pitch, and we say this, like we teach this class to high school kids and we do this exercise with them. And we started after we give them the first ramp to, story. It's a class on storytelling we taught this year, and it was interesting because we transitioned from storytelling to let's break an idea. Let's see how this works. Let's just generate an idea. And so we started bouncing around, like just letting them pitch whatever. And one of the kids pitched a crazy idea, and the other kid started, one of them was not making fun of people, but the idea was so crazy that the other kids
all laughed at him.
They all started laughing at him.
Right.
And my brother was like,
I was like, wait, hold on. I'm going to show you how this works.
As crazy as that sounds.
And like 10 minutes later, they were all engaged in pitching the idea and working on the idea because I showed them how I said, maybe that's a flashback and what he pitched. And so they got it. We showed them how to take that crazy idea and then lead us back into an idea that was really good that they all loved.
Right.
So the crazy ideas are not crazy. I mean, that's what you learn. Get it out. If you have an instinct and you think something, get it out because you never know where that's going to lead you, which is, I think is important.
Yeah, I think when I know writers who get on staff on television and writers who end up not being, end up having to pitch a lot, who say, I got into writing because I don't like people. Like, I don't want to be around people.
I want to get my computer, I want to close the door, and I want to write.
Yeah, that's not this.
And then I get in, I learn I got to start. All I do is I sit in front of people and I pitch them ideas.
If you're in a sitcom, you're in the room a lot. In drama, a little less because you room, and then once the show starts, you're maybe a little less in the room, depending on who the showrunner is. Some showrunners want to write it all themselves and just need you to take a pass at something and you stay in your office or just to generate pitches or ideas. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody works differently, but you have to be a reader of personalities on a sitcom or a drama that has a lot of room time. You don't want to be the person who picks your nose at the table.
That's baseline.
Yeah. Room writing, I think, is a little more corporate in that, than feature writing. I think room writing, you have a boss, you show up at a certain time, you work for however many hours that day, you're trying to you go to lunch, you're trying to get this much work done. So I think it feels to me like a little more.
You may go off depending on the show and write your episode. You may have a week. They may give you a week and a half depending on the schedule. You may have 3 days. Or there are times when, you come back with a rough draft of something, you write your outline, a rough draft, and you can't be very in television. It's weird. Like the lower you are, you can't be precious with your work because you bring it back and then it's going to filter through the showrunner's take. So you've had scripts that, they get rewritten and your joke that you loved and worked 4 hours on,
you got to get over
gets tossed. And,
you got to get over it real quick.
And sometimes it's just, this set isn't affordable, so we're going to cut it, and that was my beautiful scene that I wrote that I pictured. So I think, I think you have to allow that. And sometimes they may put 2 people on one script or, there are times when they may room a script. And so you have to,
you can't be precious. I think that's the way to put it. You can't be precious.
In features,
thick skin is important.
In features, you can, you have a longer period.
You still can't be precious.
Yeah, but you got a longer period where it's yours.
Yeah,
it exists.
That's true.
And this is what's great about features and feature ideas. The purity of feature ideas is my idea. No one touches till I sell it.
Yeah.
Like I have my idea and it exists exactly like I want it to. And as I write the spec, it's mine until I start the process of giving it to producers and giving it to studios, and ultimately someone buys it. I don't have to take a note until someone pays for that script.
Right. We're working with this great writer right now, though, on an original idea from Todd and Richey, Robert Zappia, and he says this thing that I love every time we cut something from his script. He's like, it's okay. I've already seen that scene in my mind. I can let it go. But he has that same non-precious attitude, and it's
it goes through the process.
Well, we actually,
we're going to mourn. We're going to move on.
Exactly.
Yeah, we met Robert in a television room, so he knows the drill. He's seasoned. He's very seasoned and very talented.
We were all taking notes together from a studio, and you guys started talking about this great writer's assistant that you guys had back in TV. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what does it take to be a great writer's assistant? How does that help the process?
A great writer's assistant is just worth everything because it gives you the freedom in the writer's room as writers just to kind of riff. And if it's a writer's assistant who knows the script, who knows what to grab. Some writer's assistants, they've worked with the staff long enough where they know what the showrunner wants. So when people are pitching stuff, they know when to stop typing and when to start. It's amazing. Like, you'll pitch something and they'll stop.
Like, and you'll be like, good. You didn't write that down.
In your mind, you're on staff and you're like, that was a great line, but they're in sync enough. Exactly. And I know the showrunner's not
they know the showrunner so well. It's by the look of the face. They're like, the showrunner's not putting that in.
He's not writing.
And they're writer's assistants we've had on some shows. There's this particular show where there was probably a room of 12 people, and they were all, they were talking rapid fire, and you're pitching, and and then he goes into the room, and then he's wearing red, and then there's a joke. Someone pitches a joke. And after an hour or two, there's no way you could, and then the showrunner would stop and say, could you read that back? Yeah. And they would read back a fully formed scene.
That's what I think Jess heard us talking about. Yeah, they would. It was just chaos, seemingly. in the room with a lot of writers talking at the same time and just pitching and just like a
And
caffeine.
they got it all?
And then the exec producer
a
would say,
court
"Now
order.
read us back in." And then I think she turned, he's like, and just went right down. And it was like a fully formed scene. And then like everyone would give him money, like
everyone would throw money.
All the writers would just like, we worship you. Like we know we couldn't have done that, but I mean, a good writer's assistant has an ear for what to catch and what to discard and when and they move very fast.
Scenes,
Is that a good path to get hired as a writer?
I think so. I think
that's
that's
one
one
path.
path. That could be a good path. If you're good, I think.
Now, not all writers' assistants, like, it's so strange. Like, sometimes writers' assistants are really good at that, and they may not be great writers. Like, they may not be great writers of their own material. Sometimes they're writers who are great writing other people's shows.
Different strengths.
Like, but if you ask them to generate their own characters and their own pilots, they can't do that. And I think too, and they've said this about like show running, I think that you don't necessarily have to be a great writer. I would say now people would disagree, but I've heard, that you don't necessarily have to be a pure writer to be a great showrunner.
It's true.
And there are great writers who are terrible showrunners.
Yeah.
Because you have to, it's more managing. It's a different
Management
skill.
skill.
It's a management skill.
People.
It's more identifying.
Yeah.
If someone has a great pitch, knowing that that's a great pitch.
Yeah.
Where if I'm a great writer, maybe I'm only sensitive to my own work. And so I think that, as you get higher and higher in the food chain, you have to develop more skills to be successful in the room, or else, you'll get stuck or you'll get washed out.
Because a showrunner, it's story, management of people.
It's everything.
Process.
Time,
Yeah.
Yes.
It's talking to the studio. It's talking to the network. It's time slots. It's editing. It's sweetening. It's everything.
Problem solving.
It's everything.
Crisis. I mean, it's no good if you're a great writer. Some writers, it takes them a long time to get to where they're happy with what they have.
Yeah.
If you've got a room of adults and you're there till 3 a.m, that may be great for you.
And if we got an episode next week,
Yeah, I mean, everybody's waiting for the script. You got people
they don't
waiting
care
to
if
rehearse it the
Shakespeare.
next day.
Like they want something.
Yeah.
pumped
Done
out
is
by
better
some-
than perfect.
Exactly. They
Exactly.
want
Yeah.
something.
So
that's good.
features,
That's certain
you may be a bit better feature person because it
Sure.
gives you a little more time.
Yeah.
And maybe you're not a production writer. Maybe you're not. Some people hate to rewrite.
Yeah.
They
Some people
just
hate rewriting.
once they get their work, they don't like to go back and tear it down and take notes they don't like. And
Let's talk about rewriting a little bit. How do you
Sure.
approach that?
I think you're doomed as a writer if you don't embrace the rewriting process. I really do. And I know writers who don't, but
Because who's perfect first time out?
yeah, and I think when you watch a movie, if the movie you're engaged, you're not sitting there thinking how many times they take a shot. I do sometimes, like how many times they take a shot at that speech. But I mean, the average person normally is watching and you're engaged and you have emotion and. So you're not thinking how many times do they have to rewrite this. You just want to know, is the final product good? Does it accomplish what they set out to accomplish? So I think, you got to embrace rewriting.
And the reality is, and it's the frustrating thing about the process. What you had when you began may have been perfect, but you have to go through the process of rewriting to get back to realize, what I had was the best way to do it.
And you might get back there.
You might. Well, the guys at Parenthood were talking at Lowell Gans Brown, I used them because we just saw them, but they were saying that they structured Parenthood on the cards because, there was multiple stories or 4 key stories moving in that movie. So they had the different color cards and they wrote the script. They threw 2 of the stories out and then put another 2 in off the first draft. But ultimately, it was funny. They said that through the process, that script got, even in editing, Ron Howard said, well, don't worry because we can put the movie together the best way once it's shot. So you don't have to stick to the cards and the way that you structured it. But amazing through the whole process, they said the movie is pretty much the cards. Like
Structured it.
through all of that, they ended up back to the original structure that they chose. And sometimes when you write something, whether it's a scene or a speech or a joke, you may end up rewriting that. And then at the end of the day, when you're sitting on set, you end up pitching the joke that got killed the first week and everybody's laughing, like, put that in, And
Now they're ready to hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other side of it, I think, is you can overwrite sometimes. I mean, I think you can rewrite sometimes so much where you lose the original essence of what you were trying to communicate. I think that's the danger. But I think you have to still embrace the rewriting process, and hopefully you partner with people, people like Jess and other people who can help steer and guide, where you don't get away from the original, what you originally intended for the scene.
Biggest frustration in the studio process. Biggest frustration.
It's overwrite.
Having a draft that works. And for whatever reason you get a draft, they push for a draft or a note, or you take a note, or you take some notes, or they bring in another writer, and your script gets rewritten, and then everybody looks at it and says, why do we want to do this movie?
Right.
and then someone in the room, some genius in the room says, hey, we did like that script we bought, like 2 months ago. But they never actually go back to the script. I've never seen, in my years, I've never seen someone say, we like this script that we had on this date. Let's just keep and do that script. There's something about the process that even if they bring new writers in and if they rewrite it, they've got to take something, they've got to justify.
A lot of work went into that.
A lot of work, even the bad work.
Money got spent.
So let's, no one ever says, let's just erase what we've done. And, rarely do I see that happen. So that's a frustration.
How do you take in notes? And is that kind of an evolution throughout your careers? Because I imagine it's painful when they first come in. Like, how do you process and then decide what to take and what to throw out?
I think initially when we first started working, I was just happy to be there. So, what do you want to do? What do you want? You're paying me to be here, right?
you want a period there? Instead of an exclamation point?
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly.
Put it right there.
And then I think after a while you start to say, well, wait a minute, that was pretty good. Like, why do you want to change that? But I think, again, if you're partnered with someone who has talent and good instinct and knows what they're doing, then you can start to recognize maybe when something is being guided away from what you really wanted it to be. And so I think good notes. I just talked to, they had a mixer at the Writers Guild, and there was some pretty major feature writers there, and it was interesting to listen to them talk about the note-taking process, and they all agreed the value of someone who really gives good notes. It's they're saying it's very, very helpful, even at their level. And these are people who have written many, many scripts.
I think when you're young, even when you're older as a writer, depending on the level of success you had, you have to realize when you first get a note after you've obviously put a certain amount of work into something it's just like when you get married and someone says, I don't like that outfit you're wearing. Or why do you leave the cap off the toothpaste? That's a note. That's a life note. And maybe
it's the gift of feedback.
Yes. It's corrective criticism, constructive. Right. And sometimes I think emotionally there's this emotional response that automatically happens when someone notes something and you're just like, okay, I'm not hearing that, or you instantaneously get defensive. And you start to criticize, who are they to give me a note on something I've lived with for the last 6 months or 2 months or 4 weeks, or they weren't in the room when I came. So I think that you struggle because emotionally you don't want to take the note. So I think the best advice, even if the note isn't great, is to hear the note and to
really hear it.
Let me think about that. Let me.
You gotta give it a minute.
Give it a minute.
Let
me digest that. Take the note.
Yeah.
Take the note.
Yeah.
Take the note, sit on the note, sleep on the note. Maybe when you come back, you say, I was thinking of what you're saying. I heard what you're saying. And this, I thought maybe you approach it this way, or, or these are the reasons why, if you're working with a good partner, these are the reasons why I chose to go another way or to keep what we have. But I think that you definitely need to hear it and to at least chew on what's being said, because emotionally you might not be in a space to really, think about what they're saying objectively.
You might read it completely differently the next day.
Yes. And sometimes, and I keep going back to relationships, sometimes someone says something to you and the way they say it to you for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're under stress. Sometimes they grew up in a house where this is the way they saw their parents communicate. Sometimes they're just those kind of people and they come across that way. But what they're saying doesn't sit with you the right way, or the way they're saying it doesn't sit with you the right way. But that doesn't mean that what they're saying isn't true.
Right.
And what they're saying isn't helpful.
Right.
Like maybe you should brush your teeth when you leave in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, but, you know,
separating what they're
be
saying.
real
you know,
mature.
your breast
How they're
stinks. Your
saying
breast
it.
stinks may be a bad way to say the note, but
Right.
the note has there's something
valid.
about the
It's
note
valid.
that's
It's
valid.
yeah.
And so sometimes you have to walk away from a note session where people have time constraints or people are gruff in their success and they say things to you and you're upset about how the notes were given and then you walk away. But behind what they're saying, you have to start reading behind the note. Like sometimes maybe we got a note from very successful producers one time on a script. I'll never forget it. And to this, like, we still joke about it. They're like, I don't like page 69 or 66.
You're 66.
They don't like page
66.
page 66.
This
Like,
was like over 20
and we were
years
just
ago.
like,
They
we were just like,
like,
he doesn't like page 66.
right. I don't even know
Like,
how
they
to
don't
really,
like page 66.
What do
Like,
I do
I'm
with
really
that?
trying to register
Okay,
that
I'll tell you
note. You know, like really, I wanted to just rip page 66 off the script and like drop it on the table and say, "There's gone. It no longer exists.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. You don't have to leave that." So I think that what we've grown to understand is if you get a note like I don't like page 66, clearly there's more behind. Like
Because
there's
that's not actionable.
I mean-
What do you do with that?
Yeah, and I also think you have to read again what's behind the note, like what's bothering the person. That's what I'm always trying to dig and figure out. So what's bumping the person, what's bothering them.
And when I'm giving notes, one of the things that I've found over the years is a lot of times when you're working with writers who've lived with this idea for 3 months, 6 months, 10 years, they read it in a different way than it may come across to me on the page. And so just by asking questions about what the intent was, and that's one of the ways that we work together really well, I think, is, you know, there are things where it may be 100% right the way they have it, but that's not quite coming across and I'm misreading it. And so just helping a writer to come across with what their intent was is part of the notes process.
Good.
Smart. Yeah.
right.
That's very
Now,
true.
when
She's
you get
spot on.
to production and you start to work with some more eccentric personalities, a lot of times stars or
For example,
or directors, people have quirks and people have things that for a variety of reasons you start to get notes that to you make no earthly sense. Like I don't care how many ways you think about it. Yeah, like so
You're
they
thinking of something right now.
so they don't like brown dogs. They want that out of the script. And that could be a key scene that you have where the dog needs to be brown and there is like a domino effect and you get the note, lose the brown dog. And you're like, well, what's wrong with the brown dog? Like what? And it could be the brown dog bit him when they were a kid.
Yeah,
It could
what
be
happened?
they did a movie with the brown dog that's coming out next year and they don't want any brown dogs. I mean, we've gotten notes that, you know, seemingly don't make a lot of sense. But I think that when you start to move toward production, sometimes you get notes, you know, we've heard people say, I gave my script to the maid and here's some notes that she had. We took a meeting one time and the person was talking about the notes the maid had. And,
Housekeeper,
yeah, I was like, interesting.
I'll think about that. Thank you.
What's you on that?
Housekeeper could be brilliant.
Now she's running the studio here.
You're right, exactly.
How do you know when, like, you know, somebody comes in and pitches you something, and they're like, this is the bad version. You don't have to take this. How do you know when they really want you to literally take that versus being able to have the leeway to take the note behind the note? How do you read that room?
I think for me, I don't have a problem engaging in dialogue over the note, like really talking through it with a person. Sometimes you go through and you do the notes and then you don't do certain notes for whatever reason, and then they come back and they pitch the note again.
And then what do you do?
You
When
realize
you
it's
get the
not
note the
going
second
away.
time, that note's
you
not
know
going
that
anywhere.
exactly. You know that is something bothering the person, like you said, not being communicated.
Well, now it's bothering them as they gave you the note the first
Right. What's bothering him is you didn't do the note.
and I've been around.
Right.
I've been in enough situations where sometimes you get a classic note, a classic studio note, or a note that's coming from, you know, one of the classic classes or one of the classic screenplay books, like or a note that was learned from a previous movie that might have not been successful that they
What's
did.
an example of a classic note?
There are some typical ones that you know you're gonna get. The main character being likable is a huge studio note. Like so you know it's fascinating to me movies that ever sneak by that choose to make a movie where the main character, the protagonist, isn't likable. They want to see save the cat. They want to see to quote, like they want to. you in the first act you're going to get notes if you have a story. And look, that's a hard thing if you're doing a story like a Scrooge story or a story where you have a character that starts off unlikable and the arc is he goes or she goes from unlikable to likable. Like there are a lot of movies like whether it's Bad Teacher or like a character is so messed up that we're not going to give them any redeeming qualities, which may be funny or may be real. You know that from in the process, you're going to get the studio note that, I just don't like the character. Like, I just don't like, look, we don't want to go on this journey.
35.
Yeah,
Scrooge. You're not supposed to like it.
Or this person, like, I feel like that's going to be a typical note. So when you tell a story about someone that's unlikable or someone that's controversial, that's always a conversation that you have to have. I mean, I see even in biopics sometimes they go out of their way to make a person who's unlikable doing things, and you're like, that was a studio, like, that person clearly, that was a studio note they had to take because they're putting aside.
So will you make that fight, or will you like put in some glimmer of their future goodness just to get them on board?
That's a tough note, depending on what you're working on. It's like, we read the first 30 pages. Hitler's not likable. Well, he's a bad
He's never
person.
gonna be.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough note.
Yeah, but
because sometimes the character is not supposed to be likable, but I think it's hard for people to read a script where they're following a protagonist where the main character is just unlikable. I think there's something internally where you I just don't like this person.
Because then no one's going to want to see a movie about somebody that's not likable.
I mean, you can always kill him at the end, make everyone happy.
Right.
You also have to look at it from the whole process. Like when you're dealing with a studio executive, they're used to taking a movie all the way through from start to finish. And so, if you've been working with a marketing team who sees your finished movie that you love that had this, anti-hero character, and then the marketing team is like, yeah, I don't know what to do with that. We're not going to market your movie. That's a lesson that they've learned over the years. So I think that's the thing that you have to kind of, when you get these wonky studio notes that may seem bad for the script you're working on, you have to look at where they're coming from. And sometimes you'll have a studio exec who's really open with you and can kind of tell you that case study, of why they got to that place. But other times it just seems totally antithetical to the script you're working on, and and there may actually be a really good reason for it down the road.
I'm so glad you're here to offer that perspective.
Yeah. And look, and I think that goes to the at some point in the process when a person tells you this character's gonna have to be likable. So at that point, you got to start coming up with ways to make the person likable. I mean, if you're gonna keep that job, you can walk away from it. But unless you own it, in your mind, it exists. The first act exists the way you had it. But you're going to have to start making some changes. And you can offer those changes and how far those changes go.
Just give them a dog.
Yeah, give them a dog.
Problem
evil
solved.
person that loves.
Yeah, that's Pharaoh's
Scarface loves kids.
Right.
No, you hear those stories all the time. Like with John Wick, it was the dog. It was like every studio in town passed on the original draft because you can't kill a dog. Hard and fast rule.
Oh, yeah, no way.
Right. It's true.
And it turns out to be the perfect inciting incident for that script. And you finally got one producer who was willing to take that risk, and it worked.
I mean, Get Out. They passed on Get Out every studio, but I mean, there's no studio note. Studio note. You want another example? As an African American writer, you're going to get the studio note. Like, there needs to be a Caucasian person in the script. Like,
couldn't it be a white guy?
Could it be a white guy?
Yeah.
And then the person that you put in there has to you have to have a positive white character somewhere in the script. Mm-hmm. Get Out. When you look at it, where are the positive white characters in that script? Mm-mm. There are none. And that was a very risky.
But you think the girlfriend is for a while.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And she ends up being the
first you do.
Yeah, nice spoiler alert. But I mean,
it's out.
The whole thing,
everybody's seen the movie.
I could imagine if had that gone to the studio process, he may have gotten that note. I couldn't imagine that script wasn't going to come out. And I think, and I think this goes back to diversity in rooms, diversity among executives, having women executives, having color, whatever. Like, I think I know it's politically correct to say, well, now it's not politically incorrect, but
it's also true and important.
It's nice to get notes. Sometimes are good. I was reading this week. I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan. There were some people, some pretty prominent people chiming in this week about the last episode in, a way that they approached a line or two the character had about the rape. Sansa, how she viewed her past going through the rape situation and how that formed her today. And then, what happens at the end of the last episode, which I won't say, but the African American women characters and how they're treated in terms of their destination in the story. And I wonder, some of those notes, being a male, you don't readily necessarily think about it, Right. And so there's a younger writer who was pitching me an idea 2 days ago, and he was talking about all the people who had laughed at this idea. And it was the comedy that was very, male-driven type comedy, quote unquote. It would be that kind of movie, a guy's guy kind of movie. And I said to him at the end of the pitch, I said, funny, I see why people like it. I said, how many women have you given that script to read? I'm curious to hear how women respond to your script. And he was very quiet. And
None.
And he said, yeah, and I hadn't really thought about that. And I was like, yeah, because I'm sure a lot of guys were laughing.
No, I was gonna say it could be for a male audience, but I still think it would be valuable for him to get a woman's input.
Even if you choose not to take the note.
Yeah. Hear
the note.
Hear what they are. Hear the problems.
No. Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna do anything but strengthen the material, I think.
So that brings up for me, how much do you think, do you need to make everything for everyone?
No.
Or can you make it for a very niche audience, but then you just do a kind of a double check, are we not super offending everybody?
Yeah, I don't think you can make everything for everyone. I think it's impossible.
I think that you can make on all a movie or a story that has universal appeal for different people. But at the point in the process where you make choices that take away the individuality of those characters and the uniqueness of their world for commercial appeal, or to appeal to other people, I think that's when you are into territory that's going to ruin the story. I mean, I'm not a little.
Did you dilute it?
Yeah, I'm not a little. I'm not a white girl from Kansas, but I like The Wizard of Oz. And I think that people respond to that. Would I necessarily think that was an audience story right away if you just came in and said, "I'm going to tell a story about," you would think, "Oh, that's for little girls," or "That's for little, girls who live in the Midwest," or whatever. But I think that clearly there are themes and things that are universal. So I think that they made decisions Baum made decisions that are true to that story. But at the point where you start saying you're going to make creative decisions in that story just for the appeal of drawing a lot of people in, I think that's a mistake.
I remember at the time when Boys in the Hood came out, and at that time we had a white woman lawyer. I remember she called Todd and I said, I just saw Boys in the Hood and I was bawling at the end of it. That's a very specific story, But yeah, I think there's universal appeal there.
Sometimes
I think it's just more important
universal.
that things like that get made.
Absolutely.
That all the stories get made. So
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Some writers or directors or people can take you into their world with such identifiable characters that no matter what race they are, no matter if they're aliens, no matter whatever it is, there's such a universality to what they're doing or what they're experiencing that a story that doesn't seem like it has universal appeal has universal appeal. And then, I go back and I see some movies now and I look at some of those stories and I'm like, they would never, the funny thing about last week when we were talking about Parenthood, they said that Parenthood doesn't get made today because it's a family story that's not made for families.
It's not made for the family.
They're cursed. If you think they got abortion, the main character Steve Martin wants to abort his kid at some point in that thing, and that's a dark that beat where she tells him she's pregnant and he's struggling with having the baby. I'm like, I can't believe. I'm sure that's a real conversation on a lot of levels for people. But it was.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
There's stuff in there that I didn't want my kids to see.
No, you said it's a family movie, not made for families.
Not made for families. Yeah. Yeah. Brian Grazer said the movie doesn't get made today.
No. But it's a movie clearly that when people watch it,
it resonates.
It resonates because if
real.
you are, if you're a parent. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care where you live in the world. You struggle raising your kids.
Yeah, you recognize yourself in that.
You see yourself.
And once even if your kids are out of the house, you never get to the point where you spike the ball. You never get to the point where, my parents, my dad still calls me. You okay? How things going? There's
never spike the ball.
Yeah,
yeah. That's the joke. I think that.
Which Ron Howard he's gonna cut that scene out of the movie.
Wow.
They told that story.
Yeah.
And they fought for this. It was the first time they ever fought. Like 4 movies they'd done with him. That was the first time they ever fought him over a scene. Like, you got to keep that scene in the movie. He was like, you've never asked me for anything. The scene's in the movie. Done.
But thematically, I think that's important. I think that's important that you be passionate about the story you tell.
Yeah.
And you care enough to get every detail and to feel for every character in your story enough that even if people say it's not universal, I think that it will become universal because of the care you take in putting that in. And if it doesn't connect, it doesn't connect. But I think that the authenticity of the experience is more important.
That's what people connect to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we could talk to you all day, except that we can't talk to you all day.
Right.
So we call it the martini shot. Your last round of advice for people trying to become writers.
If you're committed to becoming a writer, then don't quit. I mean, I remember Todd and I, after we'd written, I think our first 2 or 3 feature scripts, and we had a conversation in our apartment with no furniture, no money. And we were like, look, we enjoy this process so much. We love what we do so much that we would actually do this if we never got paid for it. And I think that was like a turning point. Like, we were like, we're going to just keep writing. We believed at some point somebody, would hire us or buy something.
We'll fill this empty apartment full of scripts.
We said,
even if no one ever
that.
buys them.
We said, we're going to fill this room with scripts and we're just going to keep writing them. So, I mean, I think persistence is important. I think if you're committed, I think if you have doubt and you're not committed, it's going to find the crack and at some point, you're going to walk away from it. So commitment, don't be afraid, I think, probably to show people your work, I mean, especially if you live in a town like LA. There's so many people who
You
are
show
connected.
everyone your work.
Exactly. Well, not everyone, but yeah. But yeah, I think commitment and persistence, I think, would be perseverance, I think, is the word that I would use.
Yeah, I would say attitude. I mean, the cliche, like your attitude determines your altitude. I do feel like if you are passionate about what you're doing and enjoy it, then if you do it for free, someone will eventually pay you for it. Whether you feel like you were divinely created to do whatever it is, writing, or there's a story that was given to you, you have to tell it, or you just are making a calculated decision that this is something I want to do. I do think that on some level, I used to say that you have to be positive in terms of the fact that the glass is half full because the business is so negative and it's the land of 99 no's, but you only need one yes, And so I used to say, you need to be positive because no one else is going to be. And then I heard someone talk, it was a great theory that he had, it's funny. If you're not positive, then you need to be the kind of person who negativity drives you. And I think that there are also people
fueled by rage.
I think there are people who say and we're different, but there was somebody that told us when we said we're going to write, you'll never do it. You're never going to break in. It's too hard. And
there are multiple people who said that.
Yeah, sometimes that's enough to fuel you to do something. Sometimes people climb the mountain because they're told they can. Sometimes people climb the mountain because they're told you'll never be able to.
Did you go back and tell that person, do you like apples?
How you like them
You're rubbing their face, but I'm sure they've read the trades.
No.
But so I think either way, you have to find your motivation, and it has to affect your attitude, whether it's positive or negative, so that you don't quit. What he said.
Jess, do you have any final advice?
Find your community. Even if you are one of those people who became a writer to not have to deal with other people, I think, whether it's a writing partner or a writing group or a producer you work with or a manager who can give you feedback, and even just those people who can support you when you get those rejections one after the other. Sure. Having people who are on this journey with you, I think will help hold you up.
Great. That's a wrap. Thanks you guys so much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Catch a Break. We'd like to thank our guests, Todd and Richey Jones. Please check out the website at catchabreakpodcast.com and follow us on all the social media. Catch a Break is produced in partnership with Catchlight Films, Rose Colored Pictures, and the Other 50%. And it's also sponsored by Crewvie, an online solution for producers to find and promote local crew and production support worldwide. Find them at crewvie.com. And thank you to Andrew Jocelyn, who created our theme music, Mantra for a Struggling Artist. Thanks for listening, and be sure to check out our next episode where we discuss financing for independent films.